Okay, so my name is Michael Newton. I'm a real estate agent here in Calgary. I'm married to my wife Gisela. We've been married for 6 years now, and we have a daughter of 3.
Hi, I'm Addy. I am from Israel originally, and I moved here when I was 5.
My name is Ana Engo. I'm a second languages teacher at Central Memorial High School. I teach Spanish and French. I came to Canada in 2001 with my husband and my 2 sons, and we've been living here ever since. We love it.
I was born in Peru, lived there for 5 years. We moved to Venezuela when I was 5 years old, and lived there for 7 years before coming to Canada.
So my oldest one had more years of preparation because I think he was in grade maybe 5 when we arrived, and the other one in grade 3. So my youngest one was starting to learn the language. I mean, he didn't feel as confident as my oldest one, but they had a little bit of foundation of the language. So yeah, but it was still, I'm gonna say, like a frightening experience for them.
I know it was a bit scary just because, I'm brand new to this country.
From the perspective of not speaking any English, they made it very easy for me in particular. First, the teachers wouldn't give me any grades, right? So I would go through school, and this was in grade 7. I would go through school, and for at least for the first semester, it could have been the first year, but I think it was only the first semester where they wouldn't give me any grades. So they would say, well, we think you are at this level and we'll pass you, or you know what, well, I never failed anything, but that was sort of their way of grading me because I didn't have any English. Now on the flip side, I kind of felt like, well, it's not challenging enough, right? It would have been nice to have some sort of grading level based on not having any English, right?
I was a terrible mom in that respect because I didn't want to leave them alone, especially the little one. The little one was more apprehensive about it, so I would just go. At that time I didn't have a job, so I would kind of volunteer in his elementary school, and I would be next door if he needed me. Like the first 3 days I was with him all the time until the teacher kicked me out, said you can't be here anymore. And he had a little bit of an anxiety attack because it was like all new for him. But after a while, he just got better.
We had the ESL program, so I spent a lot of time there. For the first little while, I was supposed to go into language arts class. I would just go to ESL, and then I would do projects there that were designed to help me with English. So Miss Hope, she was my ESL teacher, and she was just very sweet with us. She helped us through many of the projects we needed to do. We would come in and she'd have cookies for us, and we'd be able to sit down and she'd tell us stories and we'd talk, and of course her role was to help us with our English, so she would make us talk and pay attention and correct us if we made a mistake and those kinds of things. But she put in a lot of effort to ensure that our English was progressing.
The hardest thing for me when I entered school was, I would say, well, obviously like the language barrier, right? So like making friends was harder for me. Interacting, socializing was much harder than it was for the other kids.
It was overwhelming even with the ESL program, because then you go to the classrooms and you feel like an outsider. There's no understanding of the fact that you've come from a different part of the world and that you don't understand English. And there was a lot of bigotry, there was a lot of racism and stuff like that, things. Kids calling you an immigrant or just not, or completely avoiding you because you're not from here.
Me, I guess it's different for me, right? I wasn't really, like, I didn't have too many friends, so I don't know if it was because I was like new to Canada and I was just kind of learning the language, or if it was just because, also because of like just the social aspect of it too, right? Wasn't really able to socialize as much, so didn't really have as many friends growing up.
As a child, that affects you emotionally, socially, it affects your performance in school, it affects all of those kinds of things, right?
Like for me, like looking at me, you know, you wouldn't think that like I'm from Israel first of all, but that I'm Jewish. But then also having that background for my parents being from India, that was for sure different for people. They never.
Mr. Edwards, George Edwards, used to teach us St. Gregory Junior High. And he was one of the people that, I felt like he took me under his wing and helped show me the way. And he did it a couple different ways. First, through sports, right? So he introduced me to track and field. I competed in track and field. Had I not, followed his lead in that aspect, I would have never competed in track and field. And I was lucky enough to compete nationally, provincially, and all of those kinds of things. And so that really helped diversify my activities, right away when we arrived. But he also helped me. He also recognized my academic abilities, and so I remember the school implemented these Student of the Week awards, and the very first week that they announced the awards, he nominated me as the Student of the Week, and a lot of the kids I remember were complaining about that, right? Because, as you know, I wasn't being graded, right? I was being told that it was an estimate, right? But the reality of it was that I was doing the work, I was handing in my assignments, I was doing all of those things, and I was doing them well. And so I got recognition for that. And he actually stood up in front of the class and talked to the entire class and said, well, this is why, we need to recognize Michael as a Student of the Week, because even though he doesn't speak English, he's still performing at a high level academically and in sports as well.
Growing up in a Jewish community and in a Jewish school, coming from another country, it was still very different from me, even though I went to a Jewish school. I guess, like I said, I didn't really have too many friends, but part of that was, I think part of that was because I was different from the other people. They all grew up in Canada, and I guess they could still kind of tell that I was different, so I was being treated a little differently, bullied, stuff like that. So I guess that was a struggle growing up.
So I think it's important for the school systems to recognize that, and I'm sure they do, but at the same time implement more programs whereby the local population can be more accepting and integrate the immigrant population that's coming in, especially in today's age where we've got refugees coming in from Syria, for example, who may or may not speak English, probably don't speak English, don't understand the culture. It's a different culture altogether. And so having programs where we can integrate kids into the society, I think would be very beneficial for the kids that are coming in, and also for the kids that are here, because now we get a more holistic picture of what the world is really like.
Building vocabulary and learning new expressions and things like that. Like going to the doctor, for example. I didn't know how to say something, like how did I feel in terms of like medical conditions in a doctor's office. So I had to learn all that. So things like that, like very specific situations. Still, like talking about the car, what's wrong with my car? I know the words in Spanish, not in English, so I kind of have to use gestures and things like that, or sounds to explain things about my car.
Integrating an ESL student in like the actual school system would involve like having an ESL class, but also having them in the regular classes as well. Like, I mean, they need to be in gymnasium and gym, sorry, but they need to be in the other classes too, and they need to socialize with the other students, and we're in Canada, right? So I feel like that's normal to have different cultures just kind of like getting together and knowing each other and making it feel more normal.
And then there was another teacher who I really admired, but he challenged me in different ways, right? And I remember one day I had ESL class during, so he was my social teacher. His name was Mr. Fitz, and he said to me, "Why did you go to the ESL class? Why didn't you come to social?" And I thought he was giving me heck, like as if I was taking the easy way out. But he was actually telling me, "Your English is good enough now. You should keep coming to class because this is where you're, going to improve the most."
But yeah, maybe even like the first day of the child being there, you're kind of maybe spending more time with that child than you would with, someone that might have been there for a little bit longer.
So I think, ESL programs are crucial for that. But I also think there needs to be more integration into the social life of what the kids are doing here already. Throw them in with the kids and start interacting and exchanging cultural ideas so that they don't feel left out, you know what I mean? Programs where an immigrant can easily become friends with a Canadian that already has been established here, you know what I mean? I think that, well, at least when I was going to school, from 92 to 95, I think that was missing. I do want to say something though about the fact that schools are a lot more cognizant now about bullying, right? Because that goes hand in hand with racism. And the fact that schools have a zero or a near zero tolerance policy, zero tolerance policy for bullying will help kids that are coming into the country get integrated, because they won't feel this, hopefully they won't hear as much of the bigotry of what we still have, unfortunately, in society.